My name is Lula, and I am 58 years old. For 25 years, I gave everything to my family. I cared for my aging parents. I funded my siblings through their hardships. I paid for my nieces and nephews to go to college. I sacrificed my career, my chance at marriage, and eventually, my health. On March 14th, I suffered a massive heart attack and lay alone in the emergency room. What my family did not know was that exactly 24 hours earlier, I had signed documents that would change everything. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. If you have ever given your whole heart to people who took it for granted, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Because what my family discovered after they refused to visit me in the hospital taught them a lesson they will never forget. I want to take you back to the beginning to help you understand just how much I poured into this family. Because without knowing where I came from, you cannot fully grasp the weight of what they did to me. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, the middle child of 3. My older brother Gerald was always the ambitious one, and my younger sister Patricia was the baby who got whatever she wanted. Me, I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one my parents turned to when they needed help. I was a good student. Actually, I was an excellent student. I graduated from Penn State with honors in accounting. My professor said I had a gift for numbers, for seeing patterns that others missed. A Big 4 accounting firm recruited me straight out of college. By the time I was 28 years old, I had worked my way up to become the chief accountant at a mid-sized manufacturing company. My salary was more than my parents had ever dreamed of making. I also had Robert. We met at a company conference when I was 26. He was kind, patient, and he made me laugh in ways no one else could. We dated for 5 years. He proposed on a Tuesday evening, nothing fancy, just the 2 of us on a park bench where we had our first date. I said yes, without hesitation. We started planning a small wedding, a little house with a garden, maybe children someday. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Then the phone call came. I was 33 years old when my mother suffered a massive stroke. She was only 61. The stroke left her paralyzed on her right side, unable to speak clearly, unable to feed herself or use the bathroom alone. My father was devastated, but helpless. He had never learned how to cook or clean or care for anyone. He looked at me with those watery eyes and asked what we were going to do. Gerald was living in New Jersey by then, building his business. He said he could not possibly leave. The timing was too critical. Patricia had just given birth to her first child and claimed she could barely take care of herself, let alone our mother. So the responsibility fell to me. It always fell to me. I requested an extended leave of absence from work. Robert offered to hire a full-time caregiver. He said we could afford it, that I did not need to sacrifice my career for this. But something in me could not accept that. This was my mother. She had carried me in her body and raised me, loved me. How could I hand her off to a stranger? So I stayed. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Robert waited. For 2 years he waited while I spent my days changing my mother's diapers, feeding her pureed food, and sleeping on a cot beside her bed. We barely saw each other. When we did, I was too exhausted to be present. Eventually, he sat me down and told me he could not live like this forever. He was not angry. He was sad. And he was right. I let him go. I told myself that my mother needed me more than I needed a husband. I told myself that love could wait. I told myself many things to make the pain bearable. My mother passed away 5 years after her stroke. I was 38. I had lost my career, my fiancé, and half a decade of my life. But I did not have time to grieve. Within 6 months, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. For the next 8 years, I cared for him as his mind slowly dissolved. I watched him forget my name. I watched him become afraid of his own reflection. I held his hand as he took his last breath at 79 years old. By then, I was 46, single, unemployed, and utterly depleted. During those 13 years of caregiving, my siblings were nowhere to be found. Gerald visited perhaps twice a year, always with some excuse about why he could not stay longer. Patricia called occasionally, usually to complain about her own problems. Neither of them offered to take a shift. Neither of them offered to help pay for medical supplies or home modifications. But they did ask me for money. Gerald's business went through a rough patch when I was 41. He needed $80,000 to stay afloat. I gave it to him without hesitation. He was my brother. He promised to pay me back. That was 17 years ago. I am still waiting. Patricia divorced her first husband when I was 43. She had 2 young children and no job skills. She moved back to Pennsylvania, and for 3 years, I helped raise her kids while she got back on her feet. I paid for their clothes, their food, their school supplies. When Patricia remarried and moved to Connecticut with her new wealthy husband, she thanked me with a card and never looked back. When our parents passed away, they left behind their house and a modest savings account. Because I had been their caregiver for 13 years, they left the majority to me. Gerald and Patricia did not contest it at the time. They were too busy needing my help to complain about fairness. I sold the house and bought a small apartment. I invested the rest wisely. Over the years, I continued to support my family. I paid for Dennis Gerald's eldest son to attend law school. I paid for Kristen Patricia's daughter to pursue her fashion design dreams in New York. I helped with down payments, emergency expenses, and medical bills. Whenever someone needed something, they called Lula. In total, I estimate I gave nearly $400,000 to my family over 25 years. That does not count the 13 years of unpaid labor, caring for our parents, while my siblings built their lives. And what did I get in return? My health began to fail in my early 50s. High blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, cardiac arrhythmia. My doctor warned me repeatedly that I needed to slow down, reduce stress, take care of myself for once. But there was always someone who needed something. Always another request I could not refuse. I told myself it would be different when I needed them. Blood is thicker than water, after all. They would be there for me like I had been there for them. I truly believed that. The first crack appeared on my 57th birthday. I am not a woman who needs grand celebrations. I have never expected surprise parties or expensive gifts, but a phone call would have been nice. A simple acknowledgement that I existed, that I mattered. I woke up that September morning and checked my phone. Nothing. I made myself breakfast and waited. By noon, still nothing. I thought perhaps they were planning something, coordinating a surprise. I cleaned my apartment and put on a nice dress, just in case. Gerald finally called at 8:30 in the evening. I could hear traffic in the background. He was clearly in his car. "Lula," he said, "happy birthday. Sorry, I am calling so late. I have been in meetings all day, and it completely slipped my mind." That was it. A 90-second phone call squeezed between his drive from the office to some dinner event. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not mention any plans to celebrate together. He just wanted to check the box. Patricia sent a text message. Not even a call. 3 words. "Happy birthday, sis." No exclamation point. No heart emoji. Just 3 words that probably took her 5 seconds to type. Dennis and Kristen did not contact me at all. I had paid for their educations, supported them through their 20s, and my birthday did not even register in their minds. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a small cake I had bought for myself, a single candle. I blew it out and made a wish, though I cannot remember what I wished for now. Probably something foolish, like hoping next year would be different. Then there was a knock at my door. It was Helen, my neighbor of 20 years. She stood there with a bouquet of sunflowers and a homemade apple pie. "I remembered," she said, with a warm smile. "I know it is not much, but I wanted you to know that someone is thinking of you today." I cried. Right there in the doorway, I cried like a child. Helen held me without asking questions. She did not need an explanation. She understood. That was the night something shifted inside me, though I did not fully recognize it yet. 2 months later, in November, the shift became impossible to ignore. I woke up at 3 in the morning with a crushing pain in my chest. It felt like an elephant was sitting on my ribcage. I could not catch my breath. My left arm was tingling. I knew enough about heart attacks to know I was having one. I managed to call 911. The ambulance arrived within minutes. They rushed me to the hospital, sirens blaring. I remember staring at the ceiling of the ambulance, thinking about all the things I had never done, the places I had never visited, the life I had never lived. The doctor said I had experienced angina pectoris, a warning sign of serious heart disease. They kept me for 3 days of observation and tests. They said I was lucky it had not been a full heart attack. They said I needed to make serious changes to my lifestyle. From my hospital bed, I called Gerald. He answered on the 4th ring. "Lula, what is it? I am about to go into a meeting." I told him I was in the hospital, that I had almost had a heart attack, that I was scared and alone. There was a pause. Then he said, "That sounds serious. Look, I am stuck in New York this week, but I will try to come down this weekend. Hang in there." He did not come that weekend, or the next. He sent a text on day 3 saying something had come up with work. Patricia answered when I called her. She listened as I explained what had happened. Then she sighed. "Oh, Lula, that is terrible. I wish I could be there, but Kristen has a huge fashion show coming up, and I promised I would help her prepare. You understand, right? I will call you tomorrow to check in." She did not call the next day, or the day after. Dennis sent me an email. "Dear Aunt Lula," he wrote, "I heard about your health scare. I hope you are receiving good care. I am tied up with a major case right now, but please keep me updated on your condition. Best, Dennis." Best, like I was a client or a distant acquaintance. Marcus, Gerald's younger son, called me from California. He was the only one who sounded genuinely concerned. He asked detailed questions about my condition and treatment. He offered to fly out if I needed him, but Marcus had his own life, his own patients, who depended on him. I told him I would be fine. For 3 days, I lay in that hospital bed. Helen came every afternoon with homemade soup and magazines. She read to me when I was too tired to hold a book. She held my hand when the fear crept in at night. But my family, my blood relatives, for whom I had sacrificed everything, they were nowhere. The doctors discharged me with a long list of medications and strict instructions to reduce stress. As I walked out of the hospital, alone, clutching my paperwork, I felt something harden inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter. A door closing somewhere deep in my heart. Then came Christmas. Despite everything, I decided to host the holiday dinner at my apartment. Old habits die hard. I spent 2 days cooking Even though my doctor had told me to rest, I bought presents for everyone. I wrapped them in shiny paper with careful bows. Gerald arrived 2 hours late, complaining about traffic. Patricia spent the first 30 minutes criticizing my parking situation. Dennis and Kristen sat on my couch, scrolling through their phones, barely acknowledging my presence. No one asked about my hospital stay. No one asked how I was feeling. During dinner, Patricia brought up Kristen's upcoming wedding. "It is going to be so expensive," she said. "The venue alone is costing a fortune." You know, Lula Kristen was hoping her favorite aunt might help out a little. Kristen smiled at me across the table. It was the first time she had really looked at me all evening. Gerald jumped in before I could respond. "Actually, Lula, I have been meaning to talk to you. I am thinking of expanding the business, opening a new branch. I could use some additional capital." I looked around the table at my family. They were not here to see me. They were not here because they loved me, or missed me, or were grateful for anything I had ever done. They were here because they wanted something. They always wanted something. When they left that night, not a single person offered to help clean up. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and discarded wrapping paper, and I finally allowed myself to see what I had been denying for years. They did not love me. They used me. In January, I invited Helen over for tea. I needed to talk to someone, and she was the only person I trusted. I poured out everything. The birthday they forgot, the hospital stay they ignored, the Christmas dinner where they only saw me as a source of money. Helen listened, without interrupting, nodding occasionally, her eyes full of understanding. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me a question that changed everything. "Lula," she said gently, "if you died tomorrow, what would your family remember about you?" I thought about it, really thought about it, and the answer made me sick. They would remember what I left them. They would fight over my apartment. They would calculate their share of my savings. They would see my death not as a loss, but as an inheritance. 25 years of sacrifice would mean nothing. Only the money would matter. Helen told me about a friend of hers who had been in a similar situation. Her children only visited when they wanted something. She changed her will, left everything to charity, and suddenly, her children started paying attention. Not for the right reasons, Helen admitted, but at least she had taken back control of her own story. That conversation stayed with me for weeks. In early February, I dug out my old will from the fireproof safe in my closet. I had written it 10 years ago, back when I still believed in the fairy tale of family loyalty. The document divided everything equally among Gerald, Patricia, Dennis, and Kristen. They would inherit my apartment, worth $280,000, my savings of $320,000, and my life insurance policy worth $200,000, nearly $800,000 in total. I sat at my kitchen table and did the math. I had given Gerald $80,000 that he never repaid. I had supported Patricia's children for 3 years. I had paid for Dennis's law degree and Kristen's design education. I had funded family vacations, emergency repairs, and countless bull loans that everyone seemed to forget about. And in return, I had received a 90-second birthday phone call and an email when I almost died. The numbers did not add up. The emotional ledger was even more imbalanced. I called a lawyer named Raymond Walsh. His office was recommended by Helen, who said he was thorough, discreet, and had seen situations like mine many times before. We met at his office the following week. He was a silver-haired man in his 60s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. I told him everything, starting from my mother's stroke and ending with Christmas dinner. He took notes and asked occasional questions, but mostly let me talk. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Ms. Lula," he said, "I have been practicing estate law for 35 years. Your story is not as unusual as you might think. Many people who give too much receive too little in return. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" I told him. I wanted to change my will. I wanted to leave most of my estate to charity, to organizations that actually helped people that would use my money to make a real difference in the world. I wanted to support education programs for underprivileged students and cardiac research that might save other people from what I had been through. I also wanted to leave something to Helen. She had been more of a family to me in the past year than my blood relatives had been in decades. And Marcus. He was the only one of the younger generation who had ever shown genuine concern for me as a person rather than a source of funds. As for Gerald, Patricia, Dennis, and Kristen, I wanted them to receive exactly $1 each. Raymond explained that this was important legally. If I left them nothing, they could contest the will, claiming I had simply forgotten them. But $1 made it clear that the omission was intentional. Raymond drafted the new will over the next few weeks. We went through it carefully together, making sure every word was exactly right. He arranged for 2 witnesses and verified that I was of sound mind and body. He even had me get a letter from my doctor confirming my mental competency, just in case anyone tried to claim I was not thinking clearly. On March 13th, I drove to Raymond's office. It was a Tuesday afternoon, overcast but mild. I sat in his conference room with the 2 witnesses, a paralegal named Susan and an accountant named Frank. I read through the document one final time. Then I signed my name. It felt strange, putting pen to paper on something so significant. I had expected to feel anxious or guilty. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, like I had finally taken control of my own life after decades of giving it away. Raymond shook my hand and assured me the original would be kept in his secure files. I took a copy home and placed it in my safe. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I bought yellow tulips from the corner store and put them on my kitchen table. They seemed to glow in the evening light, bright and hopeful. I made myself a simple dinner and ate slowly, savoring each bite. I had no idea that my body was already preparing for what would happen next. I woke up on the morning of March 14th feeling strange. There was a heaviness in my chest that I attributed to indigestion. I had eaten pasta the night before, which sometimes did not agree with me. I got out of bed slowly and made my way to the kitchen to start some tea. That is when the pain hit. It was nothing like the warning I had experienced in November. This was a sledgehammer to my sternum, a giant fist squeezing my heart until I thought it would burst. I could not breathe. I could not stand. I collapsed against the kitchen counter, knocking the kettle to the floor. Somehow I managed to reach my phone. My fingers felt numb and clumsy as I dialed 911. The operator asked me questions that I could barely understand. I gasped out my address. I said, "Heart attack." Then, everything became a blur of sirens and strangers in uniforms. The emergency room was chaos. Doctors and nurses surrounded me, shouting medical terms I did not understand. Someone put an oxygen mask over my face. Someone else stuck needles in my arms. I heard the word stent. I heard the word surgery. I heard someone say she is going into arrest. Then, nothing. I woke up in the intensive care unit. The lights were dim. Machines beeped steadily around me. A nurse was checking my vitals. When she saw my eyes open, she smiled. "Welcome back," she said. "You gave us quite a scare." Her name was Donna. She explained that I had suffered a severe myocardial infarction. A blood clot had blocked one of my major coronary arteries. Dr. Nguyen had performed emergency surgery to insert stents and restore blood flow. The procedure took 4 hours. I had technically died twice on the operating table, but I was alive. Barely, but alive. Donna asked if there was anyone she should call. A family member, a friend. I gave her Gerald's number. He was my emergency contact, though now I wondered if that had been a mistake. An hour passed, then 2. Donna came back and told me she had reached Gerald. He said he would try to come as soon as possible. Try. That was the word he used. Try. By evening, no one had arrived. Donna looked at me with something like pity in her eyes. She did not say anything, but she did not have to. She had probably seen this before. Patients lying alone, while their families found reasons to stay away. The next morning, I asked Donna to try Patricia. She reached my sister at home. "Your aunt said she was shocked to hear about your condition," Donna reported. "She said she would see about flying in, but her daughter has some important event coming up." I closed my eyes. Of course, Kristen's wedding preparations. More important than her aunt dying in a hospital bed. Dennis did not bother with a phone call. He sent an email. Donna read it to me because I was too weak to hold my phone. It was 3 sentences long, formal and cold, asking for updates on my condition. He did not ask if I needed anything. He did not say he was coming. Marcus called from California. His voice was the only one that carried genuine worry. He offered to fly out immediately. I told him no, that I would be fine. He was the only one I did not want to burden. 3 days passed in the ICU. Then 5. Then 8. Helen came every single afternoon. She brought homemade soup and fresh flowers. She read to me from mystery novels because she knew I loved them. She held my hand during the long, dark hours when fear crept in and made it hard to breathe. Donna became more than my nurse. During her shifts, she would sit with me and talk about her life, her 2 children in high school, her husband, who worked as a firefighter, her dreams of going back to school for her nurse practitioner degree. She treated me like a person, not just a patient. One evening, Donna said something that has stayed with me ever since. "I have worked in this cardiac unit for 12 years, she said. "I have seen patients surrounded by family who still feel completely alone. And I have seen patients with no family at all who feel loved because of the people who choose to be here. Family is not always about blood." On day 8, Dr. Nguyen cleared me for discharge. He gave me a strict diet plan, a new medication regimen, and firm orders to reduce stress. He looked at me seriously and said that another heart attack, like this one, would likely be fatal. I needed to take care of myself. No one else was going to do it for me. Helen drove me home. She had cleaned my apartment while I was in the hospital. Fresh sheets on the bed, groceries in the refrigerator, a bouquet of daisies on the kitchen table. I stood in my doorway and looked at this woman who owed me nothing, who had no obligation to help me, who simply chose to be kind. "Thank you," I said. It was completely inadequate, but I did not have words for what I really felt. Helen just smiled. That is what neighbors are for. I walked inside and sat on my couch. The apartment was quiet, peaceful. I looked at the tulips I had bought the day before my heart attack. They had wilted their yellow petals, brown and curled. But the daisies Helen brought were fresh and white and full of life. Something had shifted. I could feel it in my bones. I was no longer the woman who would sacrifice everything for people who gave nothing back. That woman had died on the operating table. The person who survived was someone new, someone who finally understood her own worth. Recovery was slow and humbling. I had to relearn simple things that I had taken for granted. Walking upstairs without getting winded, cooking a meal without exhausting myself, sleeping through the night without waking up afraid that my heart would stop. Helen was there through all of it. She came over every morning to check on me. She drove me to my cardiology appointments. She taught me to cook heart-healthy meals that actually tasted good. We would sit on my little balcony in the afternoon sun, drinking herbal tea and watching the birds in the maple tree across the street. Donna stopped by on her days off. She would bring her famous chicken soup and stories from the hospital. We discovered that we both loved crossword puzzles and old movies. She became a friend in the truest sense of the word. My family, meanwhile, remained distant. Patricia called once, about 3 weeks after I came home. She asked how I was doing in a distracted voice. I could hear Kristen in the background, talking about bridesmaid dresses. Before I could answer, Patricia said she had to go, but would call back later. She did not call back. Gerald was a different story. About a month after my discharge, he called with a voice that was uncharacteristically warm. "Lula," he said, "I have been so worried about you. I feel terrible that I could not get to the hospital. Work has been absolutely brutal. How are you feeling?" I told him I was recovering. He made sympathetic noises. Then his tone shifted slightly. "Listen," he said, "I have been thinking. After a health scare like that, you really should make sure all your affairs are in order. Have you updated your will recently? You know, just to make sure everything is clear." There it was, the real reason for his call. I told him that yes, I had taken care of everything. My voice was calm and steady. He seemed relieved. "Good, good," he said. "That is very responsible of you. Well, I should let you rest. I will try to visit soon." He did not visit soon, but 2 weeks later, Patricia did. She flew in from Connecticut with Kristen in tow. Dennis happened to be in the area for work and joined them at my apartment. It was the most family I had seen in one place since Christmas, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. They had never coordinated a visit like this before. Never without being asked. Patricia brought expensive chocolates that I could not eat because of my diabetes. Kristen looked around my apartment with thinly veiled disappointment, as if she had expected something more impressive. Dennis sat in my reading chair, without asking his posture, that of a lawyer assessing a witness. "We are so glad you are feeling better," Patricia said. "We have been so worried." "No," I thought. "You have not been worried at all. You did not visit. You did not call. You did not send a single card." But I said nothing. I let them talk. Eventually, the conversation turned to money. It always did. Patricia mentioned the wedding again. The costs were astronomical, she said. The venue, the flowers, the photographer. Kristen deserved the wedding of her dreams. Did I not agree? Dennis jumped in with helpful legal advice. Estate planning was so important, he said. After a major health event, one should really review all documents. Make sure beneficiaries were up to date. Make sure everything was properly organized. Kristen whined about how hard it was to be a young person in this economy. How she could not afford the things she wanted. How she was counting on her family to support her. I looked at each of them in turn. My brother's son, who had never repaid a kindness. My sister's daughter, who had never expressed gratitude for the education I funded. My sister, who had taken 3 years of childcare without ever acknowledging the sacrifice. I said simply, "Everything is in order. You do not need to worry." They seemed satisfied. They did not ask what that meant. They assumed, as they always had, that the money would flow to them eventually, that I would take care of them just as I always had. They left after an hour. No one offered to help with dishes or take out my garbage. No one asked if I needed anything from the store. No one hugged me at the door. After they left, I stood alone in my quiet apartment and smiled. They had no idea. They thought everything was the same as it had always been. They thought Lula would continue to give and give and give until there was nothing left. But I was not that Lula anymore. I had changed my will the day before my heart attack. I had chosen differently. And when the time came, they would discover just how differently I had chosen. I was not keeping this secret out of spite or revenge. I simply did not owe them an explanation. They had never explained why they abandoned me in the hospital. They had never apologized for forgetting my birthday or dismissing my heart attack warning. They had never shown me the basic respect that family should show. So I showed them exactly as much as they had shown me. Nothing. The truth came out in early summer. Dennis was the one who discovered it. He was a lawyer, after all, suspicious and thorough by nature. Something about my calm demeanor must have bothered him. Something about the way I said everything was in order did not sit right. He started making phone calls, contacting estate lawyers in my area, asking questions about his aunt's legal affairs. Most firms refused to discuss client matters, but Dennis was persistent. He eventually found someone willing to confirm that yes, an attorney named Raymond Walsh had recently updated documents for a client matching my description. Dennis called Gerald. Gerald called Patricia. Within days, they had connected the dots. Gerald's number appeared on my phone on a Tuesday afternoon. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Lula Gerald said, "We need to talk. In person." I agreed. I told him he could come to my apartment the following Saturday. He arrived with Patricia. Dennis drove separately. Kristen came too, looking nervous and petulant. They filed into my living room and sat down without being invited. The air was thick with tension. Gerald spoke first. His voice was controlled, but barely. "Lula, we have heard some disturbing information. Someone told us you changed your will." I looked at him evenly. "That is correct." Patricia's face went red. Why you cannot just do that without talking to us?" "I can," I said, and I did. I signed the new documents on March 13th, one day before my heart attack. The room went silent. They looked at each other, calculating what this meant. Dennis leaned forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "Aunt Lula, if you signed documents while you were in poor health or under any kind of duress, those documents may not be legally valid. We could contest them." I smiled slightly. "I signed them while I was perfectly healthy, fully competent, and completely clear-headed. My attorney arranged for 2 independent witnesses. I also have a letter from my cardiologist confirming my mental capacity at the time of signing. There is nothing to contest." Dennis sat back, his face hardening. Patricia started to cry. "After everything we have been through, as a family, after all the sacrifices we have made," I let her words hang in the air for a moment. Then I spoke. "Sacrifices," I said. "Let me tell you about sacrifice. Patricia, I spent 13 years caring for our parents while you and Gerald built your lives. I gave up my career. I lost my fiancé. I ruined my health. And when I needed help, when I was lying in a hospital bed, wondering if I was going to survive, where were you?" She opened her mouth, but I kept going. "Gerald, I gave you $80,000 17 years ago. Have you ever paid back a single cent, Patricia? I raised your children for 3 years. Have you ever acknowledged that sacrifice? Dennis, I paid for your law degree. Have you ever thanked me, Kristen? I funded your education And your dreams. Have you ever asked how I was doing without wanting something in return? No one spoke. I continued. I was in the intensive care unit for 8 days. I almost died twice on the operating table. And not one of you came to visit. Not one of you thought I was more important than your meetings and your fashion shows and your busy lives. Gerald tried to interrupt. Lula, you do not understand the pressure I was under. No, I said firmly. You do not understand. I spent my entire life believing that family meant unconditional love. I believed that if I gave enough, I would eventually receive. But I was wrong. And the day before my heart attack, I finally accepted that truth and acted on it. I told them what the new will contained. Most of my estate would go to charitable foundations, the Cardiology Research Center that saved my life, an education fund for underprivileged students, a scholarship for nursing students in Donna's honor. Helen would receive a meaningful bequest in recognition of her kindness. Marcus would inherit a portion because he was the only one who had shown genuine concern, and the 4 of them, $1 each. Kristen burst into tears. This is not fair. We are your family. Gerald stood up, his face twisted with anger. You cannot do this. We have a right to that money. We will fight this in court. I remained seated, my hands folded calmly in my lap. You can try, but you will lose. My lawyer has made sure of that. And even if you somehow succeeded, think about what it would mean. Fighting your own aunt in court over money while the whole world watches. Is that the legacy you want? Patricia was shaking. How could you be so cruel? I looked at her with sadness rather than anger. Cruel, I asked. Was it cruel when I sat alone in the hospital for 8 days? Was it cruel when you forgot my birthday? Was it cruel when you only came to visit after you heard I might be dying and wanted to make sure you were still in the will? I stood up slowly. I am not doing this to punish you. I am doing this because I finally learned to value myself. I spent 58 years putting everyone else first. Now, I am putting myself first. And I am leaving my legacy to people and causes that actually made a difference in my life. The meeting ended shortly after that. They filed out of my apartment one by one. Dennis was already on his phone, probably calling his law firm to discuss options. Kristen was still crying. Patricia would not look at me. Gerald stopped at the door and turned back. You will regret this, he said. I shook my head. No, for the first time in my life, I have no regrets. I closed the door behind them and stood alone in the silence. My heart was beating steadily in my chest. My hands were not shaking. I felt no guilt, no uncertainty, no fear. I had spoken my truth. I had claimed my power. Whatever happened next, I knew I had done the right thing. The months that followed were the most peaceful of my life. I focused on healing, both physically and emotionally. I joined a cardiac rehabilitation program at the hospital where I had almost died. 3 times a week, I exercised alongside other survivors, people who understood what it meant to get a second chance at life. We shared stories during water breaks and encouraged each other through difficult workouts. Dr. Nguyen became a mentor, as well as my physician. He was impressed by my progress and eventually asked if I would be interested in volunteering. The hospital had a program where heart attack survivors visited current patients to offer support and hope. I said yes, without hesitation. My first patient was a 63-year-old retired teacher named George. He had just come out of bypass surgery and was terrified. I sat with him for an hour, telling him my story. By the end of our conversation, the fear in his eyes had faded. He held my hand and thanked me for understanding. That feeling of helping someone, of using my pain to ease someone else's, was more fulfilling than anything I had experienced in years. Donna and I grew closer. She eventually did go back to school for her nurse practitioner degree, and I helped proofread her papers. Her children came to see me as an honorary grandmother of sorts. They called me Miss Lula and always hugged me when they visited. Helen and I became inseparable. We traveled together for the first time in our lives. A weekend in Washington, D.C. to see the cherry blossoms. A week on the coast of Maine, eating lobster and watching sunsets. Small trips, nothing extravagant, but filled with joy and laughter. Marcus started calling more often. He flew in from California twice that year, once for Thanksgiving and once just because he missed me. He told me about his patients, about the lives he saved in the operating room. I told him about my volunteer work, about the people I met at the hospital. We discovered that we had more in common than blood. We shared a genuine desire to help others. My relationship with my siblings evolved in unexpected ways. Gerald reached out about 6 months after our confrontation. His voice was different on the phone, quieter, less certain of himself. He asked if we could meet for lunch. I agreed, but I chose the location. A simple diner near my apartment. No expensive restaurants or power plays. Just 2 people sitting across from each other with cups of coffee. Gerald apologized. It was halting and imperfect, but it was real. He admitted that he had taken me for granted, that he had never truly seen the sacrifices I made, that the shock of my will had forced him to look at himself honestly for the first time. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I said thank you. Not because I forgave him completely, but because I appreciated that he was trying. We talked for 2 hours. By the end, we had not solved everything, but we had started something. A new foundation. One built on honesty rather than obligation. Patricia took longer. She sent me a letter about 8 months after the confrontation. 4 pages, handwritten. She wrote about her shame and her guilt, about the nights she could not sleep because she kept hearing my words in her head, about how she finally understood what family should mean. I read the letter 3 times. Then I wrote back. A short note, just a few lines. Thank you for your words. I am open to rebuilding, but it will take time. Let us start with a phone call next month. We had that phone call. Then another. Then eventually, she came to visit. Just her, no Kristen. We spent a weekend together, walking through my neighborhood, cooking simple meals, talking about our childhoods and our regrets. It was not perfect. Old wounds do not heal overnight. But it was progress. Dennis and Kristen remained distant. I heard through Marcus that Dennis considered legal action, but eventually decided against it. The optics were too bad, and the evidence too strong. Kristen got married the following spring. I was not invited, but I did not expect to be. Some relationships cannot be repaired. I had to accept that. 1 year after my heart attack, I sat on my balcony as the sun set behind the buildings across the street. Helen was beside me sipping wine that she insisted was good for her heart. Donna had just left with her family after dinner. My apartment was warm and alive with the echoes of laughter. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who gave everything and expected nothing, the one who believed that love meant endless sacrifice, the one who almost died alone in a hospital while her family made excuses. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who understood that setting boundaries was not selfish, someone who knew that true family was built on mutual care, not obligation, someone who finally loved herself enough to demand the same respect she had always given others. I did not know what the future held. I was 59 years old, with a scarred heart and a complicated family. But I was alive. I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. And for the first time in my life, I was at peace. If you have made it this far, thank you for letting me share my story. I know it was not easy to hear, but I believe there is power in telling the truth, even when that truth is painful. What I learned through all of this is simple but hard won. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot love others fully if you do not love yourself first. And you cannot expect people to value you if you do not value yourself. Changing my will was not about punishing my family. It was about finally recognizing my own worth. It was about choosing to invest in relationships and causes that gave as much as they took. It was about breaking a cycle of one-sided sacrifice that had defined my entire adult life. I do not hate Gerald or Patricia. I do not wish them harm. I have genuinely let go of the anger and resentment that consumed me in the hospital. Holding on to that poison only would have hurt me more. Instead, I chose freedom. Freedom from expectations, freedom from guilt, freedom from the belief that being a good person meant being a doormat. If you are watching this and you see yourself in my story, I want you to know that it is not too late. It is never too late to set boundaries. It is never too late to demand respect. It is never too late to change your will, your path, or your life. You are worthy of love that does not require you to disappear. You are worthy of family who shows up when you need them. You are worthy of a life that is about more than what you can give to others. I did not understand that at 57. I learned it at 58. And now, at 59, I am living it every single day. So here is my question for you. Have you ever given everything to someone who gave nothing back? Have you ever felt invisible to the people who should see you most clearly? Have you ever had a moment where you finally said enough? I would love to hear your story. Drop a comment below and share your experience. Let this be a space where we lift each other up, where we remind each other that setting boundaries is not betrayal. It is self-preservation. If this story touched you, please hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, with a friend who gives too much and receives too little, with a family member who might finally understand why you have been pulling away, with anyone who needs permission to put themselves first. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. I wish you strength in setting your boundaries. I wish you courage in speaking your truth. And I wish you peace in knowing that you are enough exactly as you are, without having to sacrifice yourself to prove it. Take care of your heart, both the one in your chest and the one in your soul. Until next time.